don't know.
Oh,
Oh, we're live.
oh, never mind. It lied to me. LinkedIn does not work. Remove LinkedIn, and we're on Facebook. Save changes, and we are live now.
Is it
Oh,
a problem if I drink my coffee?
I don't have a problem with it.
Okay.
So I guess we're just gonna. Oh, we already have viewers. Cool. Mostly on Periscope. One person from YouTube. Hello, how's everyone doing?
Hi.
I'll give it a couple more minutes for people to just file in.
Okay. Do you see the number of people? Because I don't.
Oh, it shows up for me, probably because I'm hosting.
Okay. It kind of just feels like I'm talking to you, which is strange.
Okay. If anyone would like to say hi in the chat, you can say hi in the chat and make Ray feel as though there are people here.
I'm less lonely.
Just a little bit less lonely. Okay. I'm gonna go check. Probably give it until like 2:05, and then we can get to it. You saw Rebecca's message too.
Yeah.
Oh, howdy Carmen, howdy Joshua.
Oh, hey, Carmen.
Cool. Give me a couple more minutes. Might not wait until 2:05. Let's see. How's everyone doing today? How are you doing today, Ray?
I'm doing good. It's a little warm in my room. You can see all the sun from my window.
It is not snowing. It's just cold.
Is it cold? I didn't go out. I haven't checked.
I haven't gone out in days, but what is it? I think it's -5 degrees outside.
Oh. They're still on the ground, though.
Oh, there is? There's barely any snow. Yeah.
Oh. Well, there was snow on the ground yesterday. I haven't checked today.
I've been checking my window. There's not much snow. I'm good, Joshua.
I'm good as well, Josh.
Hi, Rebecca. Nice to meet you. Wow, 68 inches in New York. That's crazy.
It's kind of weird. It's kind of strange to think how like Times Square will be not as full over the holidays. I remember I visited New York a few years ago. It was like I could not walk a single step without bumping into another person.
Secretly hate Times Square. I'm claustrophobic in those situations.
Yeah, I went when it was like peak holiday season though, so I was like, maybe next time I'll choose a different season.
Hello, Neko. Hi, Cosma.
Oh, they canceled the ball drop. That sucks.
That would make sense. That's a good call.
No streaming either. So the ball drop with no audience. Have people call it.
Okay. I think it's been like a good amount of time.
Mm-hmm.
So, quick introduction. My name is Kyle. This is Ray. We are the researchers at UXR Collective. And yeah, this is our Ask Us Anything. We'll be answering some questions that have been prep beforehand that you guys have submitted, and we will also be open to taking questions in the chat as well. Just leave them there. I'll have my eyes on the chat, and we can, we just get this party started. So I guess I'll start off with the first question, and it is, I heard that there is a higher caliber of psychologist who the psychologists go to if they need support. Is that the same for UX researchers? Would a more senior / qualified UX researcher be required to interview a researcher? I guess I will answer this first. My initial reaction is, I think that researching researchers is an interesting space in UX. The comparison of psychologists is a little bit interesting. I haven't seen that before. I would agree that it makes sense for a certain caliber of psychologist to be necessary to be a therapist or a counselor to a psychologist for their personal needs. But I think the difference between a researcher researching researchers is we aren't necessarily supporting other researchers in their research. We are just talking to them as if they're users. I find it to be a little bit easier to do research with researchers just because researchers naturally ask questions. There's a level of reciprocity in terms of active listening, and we're both working towards understanding the other individual the best that we can. You're dealing with someone who understands research. They're already really attentive to your questions, and there's a little bit of empathy on both sides there. Researchers are always open to asking questions to clarify your questions, so I think that your level of communication is a little bit higher than it would be with your average user. Any thoughts, Ray?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think it definitely helps to have had some research experience before researching other researchers, just so that you're more aware of how like other researchers might respond and behave in interviews. But like Kyle already mentioned, a psychologist would go to another psychologist for, for help and for advice, whereas a researcher would participate in research studies for reasons of a different nature. Like, for example, they could simply be curiosity or a desire to help out the company or a desire to gain like new perspectives on how other researchers work. And so since the purpose of a lot of research studies are often to better understand the needs of a particular user group in relation to a product or like a service, and in this particular case, it just happens to be like the user group just happens to be researchers, I think that any researchers who sort of understands how to run and manage such a study would be considered qualified.
I agree. Our next question is, so generally when we do research with people, we have to take their responses to our questions and interpret them to find insights. When talking to researchers, were they doing the interpreting for you? Were they explaining their answers to you as they gave them?
Should I answer first?
Go ahead.
Okay. I found that researchers are very adept at adjusting to like any mistakes that might happen. Like, I don't know, maybe by accident you asked a leading question and the researcher was able to pivot and answer that in like an open-ended way, or they take the time to clarify any sort of unclear questions just to be sure that they're providing the appropriate answer. Researchers also don't require as much nudging to provide any whys behind the answers, since they like to just go ahead and explain, why they think and act in a certain way before they're asked. And they're also very good at clarifying when they're talking about like hypothetical versus real situations, and are very quick to like admit that they don't know something without making any predictions about their behavior. So I found it, like you mentioned earlier, Kyle, I found it very easy to talk to researchers as part of these studies.
Yeah, I agree. I found that a lot of researchers actually do interpretation for me as they're speaking. Try to explain the importance of what they're saying, the contextual significance of it as they're telling it to me. It's a very streamlined process interviewing other researchers, I think. So our next question, what were some of the things that you learned about how people are adjusting to pandemic work or pandemic life? I guess I will go first. So for context, I did a lot of interviews with other researchers when the mass shift to working from home happened in like March and April. This was really important for UXR Collective because we were pivoting from running an in-person conference to a virtual conference. So I was very interested in everything that happens behind the screen. What kind of things are people going through in their lives now? How has this affected the learning experience? What extraneous variables have been thrown into the mix in terms of affecting just the viewing experience for people attending a virtual conference? And what I was able to find out was people are dealing with a lot in their personal lives, sick parents, social isolation, addition to video call fatigue, and having the thought in the back of my mind that yes, I am working in the middle of a global pandemic. A lot of this adds up, and pandemic life has thrown a lot of people's lives upside down. And it's crazy to think about how some individuals working in research or knowledge work are almost completely unaffected by this, and other people have had their whole niche or industry turned upside down.
Yeah.
Certain industries, oh, sorry.
Oh, finish.
I was gonna say certain industries have been really impacted by this. A lot of jobs have been lost, and then other people have found the capacity to flourish in this environment. And there's a wealth of disparity in terms of what is going on based off of where you are in the world and what it is that you do for a living. It was very interesting to see how the pandemic affected different people in different ways.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and when I was, well, at least doing research with researchers with UXRC, I was doing it while it had already been a few months into the pandemic, maybe like 5 to 6 months. And I found just from feedback that I heard, people were having a lot of difficulties achieving that work-life balance because working remotely at home facilitates an environment where it's like really easy to work late into the night. So the lines between doing work and doing non-work related things were getting really blurred for a lot of people. And like you already mentioned, the video call fatigue, where the energy drain is like as high or as higher than talking to people in person, and also requires you to participate in more calls in general than what you might be used to. So if you're like in calls all day, especially if you're a researcher, you're in meetings, and then you're also doing user interviews, burnout was definitely a thing that people were watching out for.
Mm-hmm. On to the next question. Were there any topics that researchers were consistently talking about or looking to learn more about?
I can start with this one. So quantitative methods and accessibility were two areas that researchers were very interested in learning more about. And this is because fewer UXRs tend to have a lot of experience in those areas. And another big thing or big topic that people brought up was learning how to better share and communicate insights to stakeholders, like navigate difficult conversations with stakeholders and things like that.
Mm-hmm. I found that a lot of people are really interested in synthesis, learning new research methods, and quantitative research, like Ray said. It seems like there's a real skew, at least, I'm not sure if I can say in the industry, but at least in terms of the UXR Collective community, in terms of people's leaning very qual heavy. So quantitative research methods is a little bit of a blind spot for people. A lot of people are looking for new ways to collect and analyze data, and a lot of researchers I encounter really want to learn more about statistics and quantitative methods. And this is the last of our pre-submitted questions. So, what were some of the major learnings about the state of research, or better yet, the state of researchers that we've come across? Sorry, I lied. We have one more after this, but
you can start.
Yeah, I'll go ahead. I think the current state of research can be summarized as we're on our pivot foot. For some of us, we've been thrown into situations where we have to adjust research methods for remote work, think about new use cases for features and tools, and just shift our mentality to this new normal. I'd say researchers are figuring out the best way to do work in an environment that most of us weren't used to working in beforehand.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and like we're also having to deal with finding new ways of working that help us remain efficient and also effective within the restrictions of COVID-19. A lot of the methodologies that we might have used in the past might not be applicable today, and then a lot of the learnings we gained in the past might not be applicable in this situation either. So people are finding ways to work around that. And in terms of like some of the big conversations going on in the field of research overall, what I've noticed is that, you know, the whole research democratization versus specialization, and a lot of the big questions around diversity and inclusivity. I feel like we're putting more of a spotlight on these questions to move forward positively as a whole within the research industry.
So this is our real last question, last pre-submitted question. You guys are 100%. Feel free to put any questions in the chat. But so what else would you like to learn more about if you have the time?
I'll start. I'd like to learn more about new methodologies that sort of came up during the pandemic. Just interesting and creative ways people have come up to deal with doing more remote research, such as alternatives to like in-person observations or fieldwork. I'd also love to pick up R for conducting statistical analysis and to help with data visualization. And I'm particularly interested in how like educational institutions are pivoting during these times and how students can be better supported with their learning. Because side note, I tutor some kids and they're always complaining about, you know, the fact that learning during the pandemic is very different from learning in person at school, and they feel like they're not getting as much information from their teachers. So I'm curious about how the entire education industry is pivoting. And one final thing, this is unrelated to research, but I'd love to pick up a new hobby, specifically woodworking. Although that dream I don't think will be established until after COVID lets up.
Cool. I wish you all the best in your woodworking journey, right after the post-pandemic life.
Maybe I'll have to visit Aaliyah and she'll just show me how to build some tables or something.
So in terms of what I would like to learn more about if I had the time, in terms of like broadly speaking, just research insights, things I'm curious about. I'm really interested in how people are pivoting at this point in the pandemic. How are people connecting with each other virtually? I'm really interested in what companies like Instacart and Amazon are doing, as well as how people are designing services in the middle of a pandemic. In terms of methods, I'm always interested in how to better craft personas, data visualization tools, how to do better interviews and synthesize data. And I'd like to learn more about data science in 2021. I think web scraping is something that interests me a lot. And I think I could do a lot of very interesting work with it and streamline a lot of research that I do. We have a question in the chat. I'll just throw it up here. Do you think researchers will have a hard time reverting back to in-person work after the pandemic?
Might be like a case-by-case basis. Like I can speak for myself personally. I don't know if maybe the one difficulty I would have is getting up earlier in the morning to make sure I get to work on time. But in terms of like doing in-person work, sitting in front of participants, I'm not sure I would have any more difficulties than I had in the past. In fact, I think I would welcome it as like a change of pace from having to do, you know, video calls all the time, as opposed to like sitting in front of a person, actually getting to see them speak to me and like notice the little gestures and things like that. Oh, and since like we have researchers in the chat, feel free to provide your own answer to this question if you'd like to share.
Yeah, I'm really interested in what everyone else has to say. But in terms of my take on the question, I agree with you, Ray. I think it's going to be very difficult to get used to factoring in a commute into like my day-to-day schedule again. I think I would really enjoy the change of pace because it kind of, you obviously go a little stir crazy working from home, especially, well, we always need to remember that this isn't really working from home. This is pandemic work. I think that's a very important like mindset shift to have, because working from home, you are working from home. We were not working from home in the middle of a global pandemic. People are not getting sick. Hospitals aren't overflowing. These are things that like definitely play a factor into the dynamic of work right now. But I would very much so welcome reverting back to the old normal. And I think it'll be very interesting to just be able to do things in a more classic fashion, go back to old practices, old methods.
Mm-hmm.
And we have another question. So I'll just read this one out. This is a two-part question. Part one, I have a design and research background. I'm currently in a product management role on a tech team. Part two, my team doesn't have a formal research practice to inform our work, and I would like to start that initiative. How can I convince my team that design research has a space in product management?
Ooh, tough question. And I feel like this is like the question that's in the back of everyone's minds, especially when they want to start a research practice. To be honest, like I haven't been in a position yet where I've been like the sole person to start a research practice from the ground up and had to have like everyone on board. But based on like what I've heard from other people and also from some of the talks on the platform, from the UXRC platform, it's really good to sort of like build rapport with people in that space to begin with. And I'm sure you've already built your rapport because you're in a product management role already. And just to like start those conversations small, if for like quick wins, and if like a small usability project that was wildly successful could be like a small win towards creating those stepping stones to sort of build up the perspective that design research does have a space in product management, and anywhere you can fit in the research into your work. If you can try to fit in like a small session during that design process, I feel like that would really help create those stepping stones to having the bigger conversations with the members on your team to start that research practice. Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you, Ray. I think that taking the small steps is a great way to go about it. Also, like showing the value of generative research. I think generative research is a very easy thing to get buy-in from people working in like the product space, just because it has a lot of overlap with customer discovery.
Mm-hmm.
So like leveraging generative research, obviously leveraging like evaluative research, like usability tests, because those are very easy to just get buy-in on. It's hard to discredit, oh yes, I ran this test, I had people do this thing, and then here are the results. It's very much so, it speaks for itself a lot of the time. So I think those are very easy ways to get a couple easy wins and get the ball rolling in terms of developing like your company's research practice.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, very interesting. Carmen says they have never done an in-person interview before. Crazy time to be alive. Alec has a question. What did you learn about yourselves as researchers from talking to so many other researchers?
Do you want to start with this one?
Yeah, sure. I'll start with this one. I definitely feel as though starting my career as a researcher, the researchers, I've definitely had my perspective on research heavily influenced by the people that I've had the opportunity to talk to. And it has definitely given me a specific lens in terms of where research fits into an organization and how research fits into a product team, as well as what is research. And from talking to a lot of people, I feel as though research is an integral part of design and integral part of like figuring out business strategy and different business objectives, as well as realizing what is the state of research, where are the current strengths and research and weaknesses in terms of UX research, where are the blind spots in terms of knowledge in the space, practices in the space, and just discovering what my little niche is within the broader organism that is UX researchers.
Yeah, awesome. For me, I guess in terms of what I learned about myself as a researcher, talking to so many other researchers, because I have done projects in the past where the people I was talking to weren't researchers. like we mentioned earlier, it's easier to have conversations with researchers because you don't have to poke and prod for the whys behind, or the contextual situations behind their answers. And I found myself, well, at first I found myself a little bit conscientious, or self-conscious. Actually, conscientious is the wrong word here. Self-conscious about like my interview guide, for example. Am I asking the right questions? I'm a little bit nervous because like, are these researchers that I'm researching going to judge me? Things like that. So despite those concerns, I've learned sort of like, it was easier to tell from talking to researchers where my own pitfalls were as a researcher, and then also to learn from the other researchers that I'm talking to, like some of the difficulties that they might be facing at work, and how they're dealing with that, and sort of finding workarounds for that, and learning from people who have, or learning from people who are students and then they might have just graduated, just seeing like what are the differences in what you learn in school related to user research these days, and also from people who are very experienced, like 10 plus years, 15 plus years, and learning about some of their lifelong insights within the UX research industry. That was super interesting for me personally, and it sort of motivated me to become better as a researcher myself.
The nerves you get from talking to some, interviewing some people, very interesting. Carmen asks, how do y'all at UXRC decide what research questions to tackle?
Do you want to take this away first, too? You've been here longer than I have.
This is a very good question, because a lot of times, like, the research questions are obvious. We go into a pandemic. Okay, what do we do now? How do we pivot to a virtual conference when we've been running this in-person conference? That's it's very obvious where the problem is, and from there it's just formalizing the research question. But like, the issue at hand is very obvious to see. Other times it's, okay, we're pivoting to building an online learning platform. Okay, what kind of content do we create? What do people actually want to see on the platform? Very obvious once again. And then there are times when problems aren't that obvious. Problems require a lot of asking stakeholders, talking to other people on the team, finding out what the gaps in knowledge are on the team. And me personally, I have realized that a lot of my research questions for the work that I do come from stakeholder interviews, if they aren't the super obvious problems right in front of us. And those conversations with other people on the team working cross-functionally, they help a lot in terms of figuring out what the bigger picture is and understanding the needs of the organization.
Mm-hmm. I +1 to everything that Kyle said. Stakeholder interviews was also how I kicked off my research planning for the alpha and beta programs for the online learning platform. Just to sort of like, because Kyle had done research prior, a lot of generative research prior, in terms of feedback around how the online conference went. And because the company was shifting to remote work, I wanted to do the stakeholder interviews to figure out, okay, where were some of the gaps in our knowledge? What did we define success to be? What were some of the assumptions that we were making? And what were some of the things that were already based on research that we probably don't need to like retest or revalidate and things like that? So yeah, +1 to all the things that Kyle mentioned.
So Cosmo has a question. I'm trying to break into UXR as a recent psych undergrad. I think I have some very basic, but maybe decent enough experience to start the first steps, but I'm very nervous. Any guidance?
Oh, props to another psych undergrad. I also graduated from psych. It was a psych in English, actually. I can just give you like a brief overview of my journey, because it was like a direct and at the same time indirect way that I sort of fell into UX research. So I did do a master's in music technology, which sounds like it has nothing to do with psychology or UX research, but the lab that I was in was related to music psychology. And while I was there, or at least the department that I was in, because it was called the music technology department, all of the other labs were very tech oriented. Like there were people from computer science backgrounds and engineering backgrounds who were primarily within the other labs. So I was exposed to like seeing what applied research looks like in the technology industry. And that sort of opened my eyes, I guess, how I could apply my research in the field as opposed to just academia. And then this doesn't really answer your question yet, so then I'll get to the part that does answer your question on first steps. What I ended up doing to land my first job that was somewhat related to UX research was to go for a job posting that was like that. It didn't state UX researcher as the title. It was more like a beta coordinator. But in terms of the actual job description, there was UX research involved. So through that job, I sort of transitioned into a UX researcher role after like a year had passed. But yeah, so when you're looking for jobs or like maybe looking for like first steps into the field, you could consider looking at job postings that might not directly state UX researcher, but that might be like coordinator or like something related to operations. And I feel like the threshold for getting into those jobs is a bit lower than the threshold that some companies might be looking for like UX researcher roles. So it might be like a good foot in the door kind of situation that you can put yourself in. And also just to sort of like, if there's a company that you want to be in, or like if there's like a certain person that you want to work with, like don't feel afraid to just reach out and like ask questions or build relationships with these people. It never hurts to ask, you know, even if you're rejected, it never hurts to ask. Yeah.
+1 to that answer, right? Really great answer. Your journeys into UX is always, I don't know if I told you this, but it kind of inspires me. But yes, I am actually, I don't know if I can still call myself a recent psych grad. I finished at UFT in December 2019, so I'm a year removed. But I was in your exact same position. And my advice is just go look for opportunities. Go look for opportunities to volunteer. Go look for opportunities to freelance. If you are in a position where you think that you have very basic and you describe it as maybe decent enough experience to start the first steps, don't be afraid to go find like a very early stage startup and say, hey, I would really like to help you develop a research practice and understand your customer base more, because trust me, there are a lot of really early stage startups that need someone who understands research and understands how to actually build something. A lot of people have great business sense, can see an opportunity, but in terms of understanding their user and understanding the progression of their product and thinking long term in that regard, they can always use a little bit of help. And believe in yourself. I think there's, especially being a new grad, there is a lot of self-doubt there. There's this feeling of I'm being thrown into the pool, I can't swim, but believe that you'll be able to float. Go look for opportunities. Go look for opportunities in operation-related roles at a company that you'd like to work at. Just like Ray said, go look for more coordinator-focused roles. Just go get your feet wet, and believe me, you will eventually find yourself a position where you want to be in it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and hopefully that also helps for you too, Casey.
Mm.
Any other questions? Oh, is UW Waterloo?
I think so.
Okay. UWO is Western.
I have no idea. Also, U of T grad here.
We don't know so much.
Mm. There's one more.
What tools or exercises do you use to help translate big research questions and user feedback into specific thoughts, specific insights?
In terms of tools, I can do the user feedback one. So the process that I followed for I guess distilling user feedback from the alpha and beta programs into specific insights was more of an expedited process than I would have normally wanted to do. So like the primary tool that I ended up using was actually just Google Sheets while I was doing synthesis, because I was trying to do synthesis as fast as possible. So I was taking notes in Google Forms, and then that just exported right into Google Sheets. And then I was doing like thematic analyses within Google Sheets, sometimes whipping out my Post-its, but generally when I'm trying to do synthesis as quickly as possible, I don't have time for the Post-its either. So I was primarily working within Google Sheets to sort of do the thematic and textual analysis within Google Sheets. Any additional feedback you want to add here?
I will add that in terms of big research questions, I have gravitated towards, instead of doing projects for those, I do research programs. So I'll break it down into smaller projects that all work together sequentially, and the information from each project feeds into the other one in terms of answering different smaller questions is within that larger research question. So I usually start off with a high level, like look at all of the data that we've been able to collect. And then from looking at all of the data, then being able to figure out different discussion guides and different user groups that we're interested in speaking to. And from there, I like card sorting. I like sticky notes, especially if I'm trying to build personas. I really like sticky notes because they give me a quantifiable amount of data to look at, and I can actually visualize it. And I'm not so much going with my gut. I try to avoid going with my gut. I like things to be a little bit more objective. So yeah, research programs, looking at data, and sticky notes.
Oh, forgot to mention, Kyle and I actually had some great collaborative research insight sessions, and we used two tools that are very similar, Miro and Mural. So it's just like collaborative, literally just like virtual Post-its and sticky notes as we were working together to sort of surface insights from research feedback. So those are fun. Would have been great if it was in person, but COVID.
Yeah, COVID, new normal.
New normal.
Yeah. Any other questions?
"41 inches of snow." Wow.
Wait, where? Oh.
New York. It's crazy. Oh, there's one more question.
So we mentioned having to do quick analyses. What do our timelines often look like?
The biggest project I've worked on with UXRC so far has been the alpha and beta program. So that one, I can't say there was like any hard and set deadline that we had to meet that was like make or break or anything like that. We just simply wanted to move as quickly as possible so that we were iterating on the platform as quickly as possible, and updating it along the way. So officially, the alpha program was planned to be about like a month long. So those were the timelines that I went by. Although we switched into the beta program about halfway through that month-long timeline. So it was about 2 weeks of any ongoing synthesis that I had. We pivoted and switched to the beta program, and there was just ongoing synthesis from there. So that was the case for me with the project that I've worked on at UXRC so far. What about you, Kyle?
I have found that it's not so. Our timelines are very much so structured around a philosophy of trickle out that information. Would you agree?
Yeah.
I think that's a big philosophy behind how we actually do work at UXRC, is constantly trickling out research insights. And that's how you make sure the research usually doesn't stagnate like anyone else on the team. In terms of our timelines, I found that the only hard timelines that we really have, or at least in terms of like the work I do, is when I'm analyzing data. I usually try to make that as concise as possible so that I can get into the qualitative aspects and doing interviews. What do our timelines look like? I don't know if that's a good answer for your question, but I'd say timelines look like trying to minimize the amount of time that we spend looking at computers, maximize the amount of time that we get to talk to actual people, and while doing all of that, trying to trickle out what we're learning to the rest of the team so we can get the ball rolling.
I think, like Kyle mentioned, it's the philosophy of like ongoing insights. So it's less like we do, I don't know, like 5 to 6 big projects a year, just from what I can observe from what you've done in the past as well, Kyle. It's more just like ongoing insights as we're learning from people. And if there are any more structured programs, it's for those ones as well, they generally tend to have the shorter timelines because you want to learn as much as possible in as short amount of time as possible, and then iterate as quickly as possible on those learnings.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions? My question for you, Kyle, is when are you dyeing your hair?
I'm dyeing my hair whenever I can go back to the salon.
I recommend the pink and purple in line with UXRC colors.
I was thinking lavender.
Oh, well, I mean, purpley. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, if I do purple, it's eventually gonna like it will eventually fade to lavender.
It's true. It's true.
Mm-hmm. Anything else, or is that it from everybody?
I think that's it.
Yeah, I think that's it. Well, thanks so much, everybody, for coming today. Thanks for the positivity. Thank you for the positivity, Nika. Yeah, thanks so much, everybody. I think this was definitely a treat for me. I hope you enjoyed yourself too, Ray.
Mm-hmm. Sure did.
Great to hear. I hope everyone else enjoyed themselves and this was insightful and educational. Hopefully you get to do one of these again. Thanks so much, everybody. Hope everybody has a great rest of their day.
Awesome. Happy holidays.
Happy holidays.
Bye. Bye.